The bed-making apparatus fell silent, and in the stillness, Jacob's voice. My son cut through me like a blade, disturbing my affection to pieces. I stood in the living room, my easily clutching the frayed hem of my apron, the air abundant with the faint aroma of cilia and bolt softener. The hum of my life's work, decades of band backward into the night, had stopped. I aloof told Jacob and his wife Mia that my dressmaking boutique was gone, swallowed by the big brands that had abounding the city. My voice trembled as I spoke, acquisitive for an atom of understanding, but Jacob's face twisted, his eyes aflame with the acerbity I'd never seen. You're a accountability now, he spat. You anticipate you can aloof-sit actuality and drain off us? Mia lounged on the couch, her beard tossed with the accomplished flick, her smile aciculate and cold. Honestly, Anna, you're useless without that shop, she said. Maybe try charwoman houses. It's not like you've got absolute skills. Helen, her mother, sat beside her, comatose with a beam that cut added than words. My daughter's right, she added. You can't breach here for free. There's apparently ancestors out there defective a chambermaid made. You'd fit right in. Their words landed like blows. Anniversary 1 burglary my breath. This was the abode I'd congenital for Jacob, paid for with every backward night seam, every skipped meal, every dream I'd buried. I'd caked my activity into these walls into him, and now I was annihilation to them. A parasite, a failure. I capitaled to scream to acquaint them about the $6 actor my parents had larboard me in an assurance fund. A abstruse I'd kept to abruptness Jacob and Mia with a defended future. But their cruelty afrayed the accuracy in my throat. They didn't deserve to know. Not after this. Jacob paced his fists, clenched his articulation rising. You've consistently dragged me down, he said. If you'd been smarter, we wouldn't be ashore like this. Anniversary affricate was an admonition of the nights I'd sat by his bed in the orphanage, his baby Duke arresting mine, his 3-year-old eyes advanced with fear. I'd alleged him, admired him as my own, given up aggregate to be his mother. Now he stood here, spitting on every sacrifice, his words a betrayal bluff than any knife. I glanced at the shelf area. A faded bandage I'd knitted for Jacob at 6 lay folded, its absolute bendable from years of his touch. My chest tightened, a beachcomber of anxious abolition over me. I saw him as a boy amusement as I captivated it about his neck. His amore adjoined me, a promise I'd believed in. Part of me capital to beg him to bethink to see the mother who'd accustomed her all who'd backward up sowing through fevers and tears to accumulate him safe. But Mia's articulation sliced through. You're not staying, Anna, she said. Figure it out. Scrub floors or something. Helen's beam was a asperous bend air-conditioned my skin. I affected myself to breathe to abiding the storm inside. I'd spent my activity putting Jacob first, Kamchu, every accident to accumulate our ancestors whole, to accord him the adulation I'd never had. But this wasn't aloof ingratitude. It was a dismantling of everything I'd built. I looked at Jacob, analytic for the boy I'd raised. But his eyes were cold, unyielding. You absolutely appetite me gone? I said softly, my voice almost a whisper, abundant with the weight of truth. Jacob didn't blink. You heard me, he said. Get out. He kicked my attaché bag beyond the floor, the bang alveolate like an aperture slamming on our past. I stared at the bag, my clothes spilling out, an acquainted article blast inside. Not aloof my heart, but the achievement I'd clung to that adulation could fix us. I'd Kamchu for so long, swallowing my affliction to accumulate him close. But this was too much. I knelt, gathering my things, my fingers abrasion the scarf's beat threads. Tears burned my eyes, but I blinked them back. I wouldn't let them see me break. I stood my boring locking on Jacob one after most time. If this is what you want, I said, I'm done aggravating to prove myself to you. Mia formed her eyes, her articulation decrepit with scorn. Good. We don't charge your drama, Helen added. There's a shelter downtown. You'll manage. Their choir alloyed into an atrocious hum, but I shut them out. I slung the bag over my shoulder, my accomplice apathetic but advised adjoined the door. My buzz bashed in my pocket. An argument from the advocate managing my parents' assurance fund. Your bequest is ready. Accepted to proceed. I stared at the screen, my deride aerial over the annal key. Jacob's adumbration loomed abaft me, his attendance a bashful challenge. I pressed annal the message, vanishing. Abrogation no trace. Let him anticipate I was nothing. Let them all anticipate it. The door closed adamantine abaft me, a aciculate final complete that bankrupt the end of my old life. I stood on the porch, the night air bitter my skin. My Duke shook, not from cold, but from the weight of loss. Jacob wasn't aloof, my son. He was my purpose. The acumen I'd kept activity afterwards my bedmate died. Afterwards my parents passed. I'd congenital my apple for him. Camchew every seed to accumulate him safe. And now it was ashes. But beneath the pain, a atom flickered. The anticipation they'd ashamed me, but they didn't apperceive the truth. Six-Dawes actor bright waiting. I could accept thrown it in their faces, but I captivated back, not out of fear, but because I capital them to feel the amount of their betrayal. I took a step, a fresh another, the alluvium crunching beneath my shoes, the streetlights casting continued shadows, and I saw myself, as I'd been an adolescent woman, allotment a abashed boy over everything else. I'd accustomed him a home, a life, a mother, and he'd accustomed me this, a bag, and a bankrupt door. My throat tightened, and I let the anguish achieve raw and real. But I kept walking. Deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end. It was a beginning, a reckoning for those who'd underestimated me. Sip some warm water to allay your throat. And if you're absorbed on this story, let me apperceive area your affability in from. Don't forget to hit subscribe to Abutment Yus. I absolved abroad from the house, the gravel crunching beneath my shoes. Anniversary footfall. A quiet apostasy adjoined the affliction clawing at my heart. The night air stung my face, but the absolute algid was central a hollow anguish area Jacob's adulation had already lived. My attaché bag angled adjoined my shoulder, abundant with the bits of the activity I'd stitched calm for him. I didn't attending back. The bang aperture echoed in my apperception a barbarous admonition of the family I'd lost. But I wasn't defeated, not yet. By morning, a blunt argument from Mia summoned Mia back to the house. My affection flickered with a brittle achievement that Jacob ability abate, that the boy I'd aloft ability still amble beneath his anger. I stepped into the active room, the air blubbery with tension, and activate them waiting. Jacob leaned to join the wall, his accoutrements beyond his jaw tight. Mia sat on the couch, scrolling her phone, her aperture coiled in a abreast smirk. Helen, Mia's mother, perched beside her, her eyes bright with antipathy, as if my presence was an insult. Their blackout screamed demands, and I knew no apology was coming. I battened first, my articulation steady, admitting the band in my chest. I'm done working, I said. I've accustomed enough. It's time I rest. Jacob's laugh was sharp, a brand slicing through my resolve. Rest? You got annihilation to rest on, he said. No pension, no savings. You're delusional if you anticipate you can stop. Mia looked up, her accent icy. Our costs are about to bifold with the baby Anna, she said. You charge to cull your weight. Helen nodded, her voice laced with apocryphal pity. Be realistic, she said. You're not adolescent anymore. Nobody's giving you a chargeless pass. Their words were stones. Anniversary one able-bodied the achievement I'd carried. I capital to acquaint them about the $6 actor my parents had larbored me the trust armamentarium I'd planned to allotment to affluence their burdens. But their greed, their cruelty bound the accuracy abaft my lips. They saw me not as a mother, but as a tool to accomplishment, a clothier to accumulate their lives comfortable. I clenched my hands, angry the appetite to beg for their understanding. I'd spent decades Camchew afire my affliction to accumulate our family whole, but this was a band I couldn't cross. Mia stood, her eyes narrowing. There's a booth hiring dishwashers, she said, or some affluent ancestors needs a active maid. You've done that affectionate of assignment before. It's perfect. Helen's smile was venomous. Why make this harder than it needs to be? She said. You're not cut out for annihilation, else. Jacob stepped closer, his articulation low, menacing. You should accept planned bigger afore tanking your shop, he said. We're not your alms case. The allowance seemed to angle their voices, a wave threatening to asphyxiate me. My apperception drifted to Jacob at 8, his delirious forehead hot against my approach as I sewed by his bedside, praying he'd cull through. I'd worked 3 jobs that month, my fingers raw to pay for his medicine. That boy was gone, replaced by this drifter who saw me as a burden. My affection ached, a raw wound beating with memories. I capital to abatement to my knees to appeal for him, to see me to bethink the mother who'd accustomed everything. But afresh I saw the abode accomplishment on the table now in Jacob and Mia's names. They'd arrangement abaft my back, burglary what I'd built. The betrayal austere abroad my hesitation. I collection to Martha's cottage, my hands trembling on the wheel. Martha, my oldest friend, a retired tour lived on the city's edge, her home a anchorage of warmth. Her kitchen smelled of chamomile tea and beginning bread, wrapping me in comfort. As I sank into a chair, I poured out my pain, my articulation breaking as I declared Jacob's rage, Mia's scorn, Helen's sneers. I accepted the memories that apparitional me, Jacob's laughter, his small duke in abundance at the orphanage, his assurance in me as his mother. I wondered if I could absolve him, if my Kamchu could still authority our ancestors together. Martha listened, her eyes bendable but steady. She caked tea, her easily calm, and spoke plainly. Love doesn't beggarly absolution them drove you, Anna. She said, you've given him your life. He chose to abandon you. Protect yourself now. You owe that to the woman who's agitated this alone. Her words were a spark, igniting the backbone I'd buried. I saw it clearly. Jacob wasn't the boy I'd adored, the one I'd sewn clothes for through Hawkeye nights. He was a man who'd alleged greed over gratitude. I thanked Martha, my boldness hardening like bolt beneath a hot iron. I alternate to the abode one last time, animate what I had to do. Jacob stood alone, his face a affectation of impatience. I looked at him, my articulation firm. I'm retiring, I said. That's final. No one controls my activity but me. His eyes widened, afresh blurred with fury. You're insane, he snapped. You'll be allurement on the streets in a month. I held his gaze, analytic for a trace of remorse, but activate abandoned contempt. I spoke the accuracy I'd captivated for years. You're not my biological son, Jacob. I said, I adopted you from an abode at 3, abandoned like you didn't matter. I chose you. I gave you everything. And this is how you repay me. He froze, his face paling, but his acrimony surged back. So what? You aria to me my accomplished life, he said. You owe me for that. His words were a final cut, severing the aftermost cilia of achievement I'd clung to. I aerial my attaché bag, my movements deliberate. We're done, I said. From this moment, you and I are nothing to anniversary other. I absolved out the door, closing cautiously abaft me, a quiet end to a band I'd anticipation unbreakable. I arrested into a 5-star hotel downtown, a abode I'd never absurd entering. The marble floors and chandeliers acquainted alien. But I stood tall. Application the assurance armamentarium to affirmation a suite. As I unpacked, I activate a letter from my mother tucked in an old coat's pocket. It was accounting afore she died. Her autography all aquiver but clear. The money is yours, Anna. Use it to live, not aloof survive. I apprehended again. My fingers archetype her words, a admonition of the backbone she'd apparent in me. I folded it carefully, my affection steady. Jacob, Mia, and Helen thought they'd won. They had no abstraction what I was able of. The auberge apartment gleamed with polished elegance, its marble floors and cottony curtains a apple abroad from the worn wood of Jacob's house. I stood by the window, the city's afterglow edition below my mother's letter, bankrupt in my pocket, her words advancement me to live, not just survive. I'd burst ties with Jacob, but his betrayal lingered like a bruise, aching with every anticipation of the boy I'd raised. I pushed the affliction aside, focusing on the future. Today, I'd activate abstraction, a home that was abundance alone. I stepped into a high-end appliance showroom, its bottle walls communicable the noon sun, the air bustling with bendable jazz and hushed choir of wealthy patrons. I'd appear to accouter my new place. A actual footfall adjoin reclaiming my life. A adolescent bagman approached, her smile balmy and unforced. She alien herself as Sarah, her brand aflame with the shine of a new hire. Her affection acquainted like an analgesic afterwards the acidity I'd faced, and I asked to see their finest collections. She guided me to an affectation of clover sofas and carved tables, her enthusiasm infectious. My duke aching the costly apparent of a fleet sofa, and my breath hitched. It was about identical to one Jacob had admired as a jailbait aback. We'd sat calm planning a approaching that now acquainted like a dream. I saw him in my apperception sprawled beyond our old couch, his amusement bushing the room as we watched cartoons. The anamnesis was a aciculate agony, active anxious to reach out to ask if he regretted his cruelty. My fingers fumbled for my buzz and I texted Martha, my affection racing. I'm at the exhibit and this daybed reminds me of him. What if he's sorry? Martha's acknowledgement was swift, her words the abiding anchor. He chose to aching you, Anna. Don't let adulation cull you aback into his trap. Your building article new, her bulletin assure me like a aggravate threading through circuitous fabric. I nodded to Sarah, my articulation steady, and asked about the sofa's price. Before she could answer, Articulation burst through the air, sharp and biting. Who let her in? This isn't an austerity store. I angry to see Jane Helen's accessory striding to join us. Her heels beat with menace. I'd met her at Jacob's wedding, her boring dismissive as if I were beneath notice. Now she loomed close, her articulation loud, abundant to draw stares. A tailor? You can't allow this place, she said. Get out afore you decay our time. The showroom hushed eyes pinning me like spotlights. Jane's words echoed me as Helen's. Jacob's anniversary won an admonition of the contemptuousness I'd endured. My affection pounded, but I stood firm, Martha's words echoing in my mind. I'm actuality to buy furniture, I said. My accent even. I accord actuality as much as anyone. Jane laughed. A acrid allocation complete that angry heads. Belong? You're a nobody, she said. Go back to your aggravate and thread. The weight of the crowd's boring apprentice to join me. And for a moment, I acquainted the old appetite to shrink, to disappear, as I'd done so generally to keep peace. But I wasn't that woman anymore. The one who came bite to hold her ancestors together. I accomplished into my bag affairs out a coffer annual from my parents' assurance fund. $6 million, I said, captivation it up. Is this abundant to shop here? The allowance gasped. A ripple of shock spreading. Sarah's eyes widened, her easily bound in awe. Jane's beam vanished, her face flushing, a fresh clarification to a ailing white. She grabbed the statement, her fingers abashed as she scanned it. This is fake, she stammered. There's no way you accept this money. You're a fraud. Her voice cracked, agony bit by bit in as the army murmured. I kept my composure, my resolve unyielding. I angry to Sarah. I'll booty this daybed and the dining set over there, I said. Total it up. Sarah nodded her fingers quick on her tablet, her action palpable. The crowd's whispers shifted, some comatose in respect, others staring in disbelief. Jane's agitation flared, her eyes darting. She lunged forward, her coffee cup, tilting the hot aqueous beyond my blouse. Oops, she said, her sneer returning. Maybe you should apple pie that up yourself. The army gasped again, and the bite of abasement burned. But I stood tall, my articulation calm. I pulled out my phone, dialing the police. I'd like to abode aggravation and defamation. I said my words clear. Jane's face crumpled, her blowing gone. You can't do this, she hissed. I perceive your kind. You're nothing. The police arrived swiftly, two admiral with steady, able gazes. I handed them the coffer annual and assurance armamentarium documents, all notarized, proving the $6 million was mine. They advised them, afresh angry to Jane. You've made baseless accusations. One said that's defamation. Apologize now, or we'll proceed with charges. Jane's aperture quivered, her eyes afire with resentment, but she had no choice. I'm sorry. She decrepit her articulation an acrimonious whisper, her boring anchored on the floor. I angry to Sarah, who stood frozen, her eyes animated with gratitude. I appetite you to handle my purchase, I said. You've been able from the start. Sarah beamed, her easily shaking as she accomplished the sale, a $200,000 adjustment that apparent her aboriginal major commission. The army murmured approval, their whispers now of admiration. I bent a woman's voice nearby, bendable but clear. That's the Thompson's daughter, she said. Her parents helped so abounding in this city. The words afflicted a anamnesis of my parents' charity work, but I pushed it aside, absorption on the present. I larboarded the showroom, my blouse damp but my spirit unbroken. Jane's defeat was a footfall forward, but Jacob, Mia, and Helen still loomed their betrayal, a claiming I'd face for now. I agitated the weight of my mother's trust, and it was enough. The showroom's murmurs achromatic as I stepped into the sunlight. My clammy blouse, a badge of chains, defeated malice. Her affected acknowledgement echoed in my mind. A baby victory. But the anguish of Jacob's absence pulsed beneath it. I touched the coffer annual in my pocket, affidavit of the $6 actor my parents left me, and acquainted a quiet resolve. I wasn't the burst woman Jacob, Mia, and Helen had approved to accomplish me. I was Anna, and I was abstraction out a activity they couldn't touch. Weeks later, I stood backstage at a appearance exhibition, the air blubbery with the aroma and the hum of anticipation. The accident accustomed bounded designers, and I'd been arrived to present a dress aggressive by my years as a tailor. The date glowed beneath balmy lights, a sea of faces cat and mouse beyond the clover curtain. I smoothed the cottony of my creation, a flowing clothes alloyed with memories of my mother's aerial sketches. My hands trembled, not from fear but from the weight of this moment. I was no longer just a clothier band in the shadows. I was claiming my abode in the light. As I adapted the dress on its mannequin, articulation cut through the crowd's murmur, aciculate and venomous. Look who's assuming to be an artist now. I angry to see Helen Mia's mother gliding toward me, her cottony bandage abaft like a banderole of disdain. Her friends followed their eyes aflame with confidence judgment. Helen's aperture coiled into a sneer. A clothier at a fashion show. You're out of your league, Anna. Stick to acclamation hymns. Her friends tittered their laughter. Acquire acid by years of superiority? Her words stung. Alveolate the contemptuousness I'd faced from Jacob, Mia, and Jane. My affection wavered, and I pictured Jacob in the audience. His face bendable with the pride he'd once shown aback I'd sewn him an anorak for his aboriginal job. The angel was a quiet wound, stirring and anxious to accept he could still be that boy. I slipped abaft a rack of fabrics, my fingers averseness for my phone. I alleged Martha, my voice barely aloft a whisper. I'm at the exhibition and Helen's here, I said. I accumulate seeing Jacob in the crowd. What if he could be appreciative of me? Martha's articulation was firm. The abiding cilia threw my doubt. He chose to abandon you, Anna, she said. This is your moment, not his. Don't let adulation dark you to the truth. Her words steadied me, affairs me aback from the bend of my heart's pull. I thanked her, my boldness abbreviating like a well-stitched seam. I stepped out adverse Helen. I accord here, I said, my voice calm but unyielding. I'm presenting architecture and I'm not leaving. Helen's eyes narrowed, her smile decrepit with malice. You a designer, don't abase yourself, she said. Her accompany nodded, one blubbering about my asperous hands, addition abuse that I lacked the chic for such an event. The host alleged my name, and I absolved assimilate the stage, the cottony dress shimmering under the lights. I battened briefly, my articulation clear. Answer how my mother's love for adorableness had shaped my craft. I apparent the gown, its graceful lines abounding like water, its bolt communicable the ablaze in bendable waves. The audience gasped, afresh erupted in applause. Their cheers, a course lifting me higher. A arresting analyzer in the advanced row stood her articulation carrying. This is artistry, she said. A vision of around-the-clock elegance. Helen's face contorted, her abode unraveling. She pushed through the crowd, her articulation shrill. That's stolen, she shouted. She affected that design. She's a fraud. The allegation drew aciculate breaths from the audience. I acquainted a beam of the old appetite to retreat to Kamchu, as I had for so continued to accumulate peace. But I stood firm, Martha's words anchoring me. I pulled my mother's sketchbook from my bag, its pages beat but active with her drawings. I captivated it up, flipping to the gown's aboriginal sketch, anachronous decades ago, in her hand. This is mine, I said. My mother's legacy, my creation. Show your affidavit if you have it. The analyzer stepped forward, analytical the sketchbook. She nodded, her tone authoritative. This is genuine, she said. The architecture is original. Helen's friends fell silent, their faces paling. Helen stammered, her articulation breaking. You can't accept fabricated this, she said. You're nobody. Her agony was raw, her status crumbling afore the crowd. One of her friends, a woman in a blatant hat, lunged forward, avaricious for the microphone in my hand. Thief! She screamed, her fingers, abrasion my wrist. The admirers gasped and security rushed in, abstinent her as she shouted, her accord shattered. I remained calm, handing the sketchbook to the host, who projected it on a screen for all to see. The affirmation was undeniable. My mother's autography a quiet admonishment to Helen's lies. The police arrived, summoned by the staff, and questioned Helen and her friend. I provided a notarized letter from my parents' acreage, acknowledging my bequest and my appropriate to their artistic legacy. The admiral warned Helen of aspersion charges, their choir stern. She decrepit an apology, her eyes afire with resentment, and was escorted out her accompany abaft their active bowed. As the crowd settled, a man approached his face, asperous but kind. He apprenticed a small box into my hand, his articulation low. Your mother asked me to accord this to you long ago, he said. She said you'd apperceive aback the time was right. I stared at the box, my beating quickening. But he slipped into the army afore I could respond. I tucked it into my pocket, its weight a abstruseness and a comfort. The host returned the microphone, and I thanked the audience, my articulation steady. Their acclaim roared a beachcomber of validation that drowned out Helen's malice. I larboard the stage, my mother's sketchbook under my arm. The box, a quiet promise. Helen's defeat was a milestone, but Jacob and Mia remained their betrayal, a storm I'd face next. For now, I stood in the light, my mother's bequest animate in me, and I knew I was unstoppable. The exhibition's acclaim achromatic as I stepped off the stage. Helen's ashamed retreat, a fleeting triumph. The baby box in my pocket, the allowance from my mother delivered by a stranger, acquainted added than the sketchbook beneath my arm. I slipped into a quiet alcove, aperture it to acknowledge a aureate bed-making needle, its apparent etched with aerial flowers. A agenda in my mother's autography read, "Shine as you always have, Anna." My throat anchored her words, a allegorical ablaze through the shadow of Jacob's betrayal. I'd faced Helen's malice, but Jacob and Mia still loomed their cruelty, a storm I'd anon confront. Days later, I sat in my hotel suite, the aureate aggravate bright beneath the lamplight, an attribute of my mother's faith. My new home was demography shape, but peace remained elusive. Jacob had launched the abandoned online attack live-streaming Circadian on StreamNet. His approach, blue-blooded, my mother abandoned me, cast me as a cold, egocentric villain. He sat afore the camera, his voice quivering with apposite sorrow, claiming I bawled him to animate in affluence while he struggled. Thousands watched their comments awash with benevolence for him, acidity for me. My name, my face, alike my hotel's abode advanced beyond the platform, branding me a brutal monster. He awash merchandise, pocketing donations from strangers affected by his lies. I circling through his latest stream, my chest constricting as he spoke. My mother never admired me, he said. She formed dead-end jobs, a fresh vanished aback I got married. Now she's rich and I'm annihilation to her. The comments surged, labeling me cruel, inhuman. The betrayal was a beginning anguish added than his words in our aftermost fight, each lie a cilia unraveling the activity I'd sown for him. I best up a photo from my bag Jacob at his academy graduation, his smile beaming as I'd pinned a boutonniere to his suit. My fingers traced his face, and a quiet longing afflicted to accept he could still be the boy who'd hugged me that day. I texted Martha, my easily unsteady. "Jacob's abused me online," I wrote. "I see him in this photo and I appetite to believe he's sorry." Martha's acknowledgement was sharp, unwavering. "He's profiting off your pain, Anna," she said. "He's not your boy anymore. Show the apple the truth." Her words broke in the fog of my heart, a admonition of the amount of camchew. I set the photo down, my boldness band calm like a broken seam. Jacob had alleged this war, ag my adulation into a weapon. I would end it with the truth. I created a StreamNet account, allotment my approach the truth about Jacob's mother. I aggregate evidence, acceptance papers, charge receipts, the abode deed. I'd signed over to him and planned my Aboriginal animate stream. A 4-activity lev, I captivated the golden needle, its weight calmed me. My mother's words echoed, advancement me to shine. I opened the stream, my face calm before the camera. "I'm Anna, the woman Jacob calls heartless," I said. "Here's the absolute story." I battened clearly, recounting how I'd activate Jacob in an orphanage, a abashed 3-year-old abandoned by his bearing parents. I declared the nights I'd swan until my hands bled, the years I'd formed assorted jobs to accord him a home, an education, a future. I aggregate the affliction of his betrayal, how he'd apprenticed me from the abode I'd bought, how Mia and Helen had mocked me as I left. I captivated up the adoption papers, the receipts, the deed, anniversary certificate attestation to my sacrifice. I played a recording captured by a neighbor's aegis arrangement of Mia's voice, aciculate and dismissive. "Anna, you'd be bigger off as a maid," she said. "We don't charge you here." The beck erupted, admirers calamity in their comments, a torrent of shock and outrage. "This is unbelievable," one wrote. "Hiaria about everything," another said. She gave him aggregate and he threw her away. I leaned into the camera, my articulation steady. "I plan to leave my inheritance, $6 actor from my parents to Jacob and Mia," I said. "But they chose to abandon me. I'm not heartless. I'm done actuality their tool. To drive the point home, I donated $50,000 live, agreeable it amid accidental viewers, an action that beatific the babble into a frenzy. Jacob's beck faltered as his followers flocked to mine, his lies crumbling. He went live, his face ashen, his articulation frantic. "She's manipulating you," he shouted. "Those abstracts are forged. She's consistently been a liar." But his agony abandoned fueled the backlash, admirers abounding his comments calling him careless a parasite. I uploaded a final allotment of evidence, a notarized assurance armamentarium statement, proving the $6 actor was mine, legally inherited. The platform's moderators intervened, reviewing my affirmation and his streams. They banned his annual that night, citation aspersion and fraud. Mia, analysis his downfall, vanished. A alternate associate told me she'd moved out. Abrogation, Jacob abandoned in the abode I'd already alleged home. His followers deserted him, his commodity unsold, his bluff shattered. I assassin a lawyer, filing an accusation for defamation and to accost the house. The cloister disqualified in my favor, the judge's articulation firm, as he ordered Jacob to pay amercement and return the deed. Jacob disappeared, his buzz disconnected, his presence erased from my life. I stood in the reclaimed house's abandoned active room, sunlight spilling beyond the bald floor. The amplitude acquainted like a drifter bare of the amore I'd caked into it. I held the aureate needle, my mother's words whispering through me. Flash as you consistently have. I'd apparent Jacob's lies, reclaimed what was mine and won. But the achievement was brave with affliction, the loss of the boy I'd loved. A quiet ache. I texted Martha my words simple. It's over. I'm free. Her acknowledgement was brief. Proud. I walked out, locking the door. The abode no best my home. Jacob had taken that, but he couldn't booty my strength. The aureate aggravate gleamed in my hand. A affiance-eyed backpack advanced to animate to shine no amount the cost. The aperture of the reclaimed abode clicked shut abaft me. The complete soft but adamant like the final stitch in a continued aching seam. I stood on the porch, the aureate bed-making aggravate balmy in my palm. Its categorical flowers communicable the crumbling sunlight. Jacob was gone. His lies apparent his world, burst by the weight of his own greed. The achievement was mine, but it agitated a quiet sorrow. The accident of the boy I'd raised, lingering like a cilia I couldn't cut. I'd fought for my truth, taken aback what was rightfully mine, and yet my affection ached for the ancestors I'd already dreamed of. I sold the abode oral a month, the transaction accomplished in a lawyer's appointment that smelled of ink and polished wood. The money abutting the $6 actor from my parents' assurance fund, but wealth wasn't what I sought. I craved peace, a abode area the echoes of betrayal couldn't reach. I activated an illiteral village, a array of salt-weathered cottages nestled adjoin the sea. My new home was simple, its whitewashed walls and advanced windows affable the morning light. I set my bed-making apparatus by a window. The ocean's rhythm, a steady companion, and acquainted a calmness achieve over me like bolts smoothed beneath an iron. I opened a baby dressmaking workshop, not for profit, but for joy. I taught bounded accouchement to sew their acquisitive hands, threading all overs and band patches with clumsy pride. Their chatter filled the space, a affable coarse abrasion abroad the scars Jacob had left. I watched a boy called Tommy, almost 9, beam as he accomplished a askew scarf, his eyes bright with triumph. I saw in him the atom I'd already accomplished in Jacob. A spark snuffed out by choices not my own. The anamnesis brought a pang, but I let it drift like sea cream abandoning on the shore. One afternoon, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, I absolved to the bank with Martha, who'd appear to visit. We sat on an asperous bench, the after effects a soft beating adjoin the sand. I batten of Jacob, my articulation low, abundant with the weight of years. I accepted how I'd clung to hope, analytic his eyes for the adolescent I'd saved, alike as he wielded my adulation adjoin me. I accepted the nights I'd lain awake, apprehensive if I'd bootless him, if my camchew had somehow pushed him away. Martha listened, her duke comatose on mine, her boring abiding as the tide. She battened then, her words affable but firm. You didn't abort him, Anna. She said, You gave him a life, a mother added than best would dare. He chose to breach that bond, not you. You're authentic by this moment, by the woman who rose from the ashes. Her words woo through me, acclamation the frayed edges of my heart. I knotted my throat tight and pulled the aureate aggravate from my pocket. I captivated it up, its flowers bright in the dusk. My mother knew, I said. She knew I'd charge this, a admonition to shine. Martha's eyes channeled with a smile. You're animated now, she said. Look at this place, these children, this activity you've built. You're enough, Anna. Added than enough. We sat in silence, the sea's buzz wrapping about us. And for the aboriginal time, I felt complete, not healed, but whole. as if the pieces of me broken by Jacob's betrayal had activated their place. Word came after through a Aborigine who'd apparented online. Jacob was living on the streets far from the city, his clothes tattered, his easily clutching a jacket. I'd sewn him long ago. It seems fraying but intact. A video showed him by a curb, his eyes hollow, blubbering to himself as passers-by averted their gazes. The image stirred no joy, no anger, abandoned a breast ache, like the anamnesis of a bruise. He'd become an adumbration baffled by his own lies trapped in a cage of his making. I didn't ambition him suffering, but I know best agitated his weight. He was his choices and I was mine. I alternate to my workshop, the children's laughter greeting me as I entered. I affianced a new arrangement to the fabric. My easily steady the aureate aggravate a flame as I worked. The sea breeze agitated the aroma of alkali and freedom, and I breathed it deeply. I'd accustomed Jacob my heart, my years, my everything, and he'd accustomed me lessons in return. I didn't affliction adopting him, not for a second, but I regretted the decades I'd spent assertive adulation, meant abatement myself appear true. To authority ancestors that didn't amount me. That was the hardest truth, the one that adapted me. Kindness was sacred, but it had to accommodate me too. I sat by the bank one last time before Martha left. Abstraction a new dress architecture in the twilight. The golden aggravate adequate beside me, its annual aciculate adjoin the metal. Anticipation of my mother, of the accouchement in my workshop, of the activity I'd alloyed from the accoutrement of loss. I was Anna, not just a mother, not aloof a tailor, but a woman who'd abstruse to shine. The waves rolled in amaranthine and unbroken, and I knew I belonged actuality to myself, to this moment, to the approaching I'd crafted with my own hands. Allotment your thoughts in the comments below. If this adventure has you absent more, don't balloon to like and subscribe to bolt the abutting journey. Thanks for abutting me. See you in the next